friends, welcome to our creation Bible study where we are exploring Genesis 1 and eventually 2, and believe it or not, chapter 3, even. I know that we are in part 11, but we are only this far. But don't worry, things are going to start to pick up a little bit more. We've spent a lot of time on very small phrases and very just brief thoughts that are in the creation story, but that's to provide a foundation for us. We're going to be in the fourth day today, and we're going to start to see some things start to fit together in this day. So let's start with a word of prayer, and then we'll get into the word. Gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for what you teach us. As we sit down, give us the opportunity to receive from you anew, and may we hear your word and find refreshment, encouragement, and understanding. This creation that you have made it's big, it is beautiful, it is vast, and the more we hang out in this story, the more we are brought awe and joy. So renew that awe and joy today as we explore your fourth day. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we've gone through 1 through 3. We are in day 4 today, and my hunch is that we're going to end up with multiple branches. The way that we do it here is just for the sake of this study, we're taking the text and we're taking some big thoughts that are popping out and see kind of how they grow, just for the sake of little visual for helping us understand creation. So let's get into our reading today. We're going to look at a new section here. We just met the plants on the ground, and everything's starting to sprout up, but we're missing something. Okay, let's find out what we're missing. In Genesis 1, starting at verse 14, I'll read it for us. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. Okay, so in this little section here, just on the fourth day, what are some of the big things that you see happening here on this day? Seasons. Okay, so let's put that in right over here. Let's put seasons, but can we put something with that? Can we put day and night with that too? Yeah, so let's put day, night. So that's mentioned as well. What else do we have? We have the sun, but not just the sun. Sun, moon, what else? Stars. Okay, so we're going to call those, as sometimes like older versions of the Bible will call them heavenly bodies, the things that just kind of like light up in the heavens. So we're going to put stars, moon, and I'm also going to contend planets. Yeah. Yeah. And you'll see why. You'll see why in just a moment. So I'm gonna put Jupiter in this as well, and Pluto and Halley's Comet, and well, actually no, I have another theory about Halley's Comet, but that's for another day. That's when we talk about the flood. The sun, yeah. So I'm just gonna here. We'll put the sun in here too because even though we know it's a star, who wrote this? Who wrote Genesis? I mean, God wrote it, but whose pen did he use? Moses. Who was Moses writing to? Israel, right? And so when God writes his word, he writes to a time, he writes to a place, he writes to a people that have a certain understanding of things. And Moses is also addressing what they understand, but he's also speaking against, you think about Israel, this was written at a time in the wilderness, this was brought to God's people in the time of the wilderness, and it was Israel was made up of a people who were leaving Egypt and all the polytheism of Egypt. So this was like their context and kind of the baggage that they're carrying in. So some of this creation story deals with that mindset of people who would worship the sun, right? They would worship Pharaoh. They would worship created things, right? Like Romans 1 talks about. All right. So anyway, we have all the heavenly bodies that are here. What else? What else do we have? What else kind of stands out to you guys? I'm going to put above this one, I'm going to put the word fixed because that's what I really want to get into today, but it deals with seasons. Did you guys also notice the word signs? Signs. That's something that is worthy of talking about. Not stop signs or yield signs, but signs. That is important in the Bible. And what else? I'm going to put the word rule here. Rule. So we have all these things, right? The heavenly bodies, right? They're put in the sky. They're fixed into the sky to rule, and they're there as signs. Okay, so there's a lot to talk about with each one of these things, but let's talk about this first. Here, let's just talk about this first because there's not as much to talk about here, and we've already addressed a lot of it. This is dealing with the sun, the moon, the stars. He refers to the greater and lesser light, but I want us to think about that for a moment. Is our sun the biggest star in the universe? No, it's not. Is that okay? Yeah, it's okay. It's not okay. All right. So we need, there's dissent in the room for all of you streaming online. Yeah, we're going to start shooting missiles at stars. I think some people might feel that way. Might be filled with too much pride that we got to blow up other planets that are getting in our way. So the greater and lesser, I want us to just think about that in relation to us. Is there a star that is more important than our sun to us? No, no. In fact, I think you could argue that it is the greatest star in the known universe. And not because it's the biggest one or it has the coolest color or something like that, but because how it works in dynamic with our planet is we have life here. We haven't found this sort of life, right? We've found microbial sort of life on other planets, but we haven't found like life other than here on Earth. And a lot of that is due to our proximity to the sun and how the sun interacts with us. Now, it also refers to, and this is important to note, that it calls the moon the lesser light. Does the moon give off its own light? No, it does not. We know this. Ancient people had a good idea about this, but they weren't totally sure yet. The earth was still flat in their minds at the time. They were still working off of what they knew. But is it a light in the sky? Can you, on a full moon night, can you see around in the dark? You can. Is it as good as the sun? No, it's not as good as the sun, but it does something. And when the moon is out, it tells us it's nighttime. When it is shining, I know sometimes it peeks its way out here and there, but when it's shining, we know it's nighttime. When the sun is out, we know it's daytime. So that is what's really important here is that we see what these things are and that these are like, yeah, we're just going to leave it at that. So this is all of the sun, the stars, the moon, and I'm going to say even planets. We don't have a creation story of Mercury, for instance. But what we're told is all the things in the sky were put in here on the fourth day. That Earth was there prior. Now there is here we're going to hold it when we get over here. So we're gonna follow this arc here. There's not a lot to branch off here. A couple little things, but we'll get to it in a moment. I want to talk about this notion of fixed. So there are seasons that are brought about. And how do we know what season are we in right now? Car alarm season. Winter, I know. I love talking to a group of people living in Ventura County. They're like, I don't know what season it is. Does it matter? It's, is it? I mean, early. When it's still dark out, it's in the upper 40s, friends. We are a precious few, aren't we? Um, Delicate people. We suffer much. My brother came in to visit, and he got off the plane, and he's like, "Wow, this is amazing here." I left it; it was 10 in Des Moines, 10 whole degrees. That's all they got that day, and windy. So anyway, it is the winter time, and we don't realize it here. And if how many show of hands, how many of you grew up in this area? Oh, okay, only a few. Okay, only a few. For those of you who did not grow up in this area, you probably have a better grasp of seasons a little bit. Even in Texas, right? You got see, there's too hot and ice, right? I think is kind of what you get in North Texas. Um, so there, what we see is that all of this is impacted, we know, by our connection to the sun, isn't it? It's the place where we're at. It is the distance we are from the sun, but so much of it is impacted by the sun. So there's an order that God brought in. So the four seasons that exist are and yes, there are four of them, and around the world. Here we have like one and a quarter. Um, but the four seasons around the world, that's something that God built in on the fourth day. So is winter a good thing? Yes. Is summer a good thing? Spring and fall? Also, yes. Yeah. So these are all good. These are all part of God's holy and divine design for his creation. Now, what do we learn about in seasons? We are given rhythm, aren't we? Uh, Sometimes it's nice to break up the rhythm of our days, right? And have new things, right? And try a new food or meet a new person or go to a new place. Like sometimes this is a lot of fun, but do we need routine in our lives? Absolutely, we do. We need routine, and we see our world existing in it. Now, a routine can become a rut. Is a rut a good thing? Where you're just mindlessly doing the same things over and over? No, it's not good. Because then you stop appreciating it. So what we get to see here is that there is, and you're going to see a word come up again. This is a word that's been nearly every lesson. Is this order? Right? There's structure to it. We need this. Now, we can be over orderly people, and we can just be all about like everything needs to be where it needs to be, and everything needs to be precise, and everything needs to be a certain way. We can certainly go overkill in this. And some of you are like, yeah, that might be me. But order is a good thing, right? We need streets. If we don't have a street, we're all just driving everywhere, all over each other's lawns, through each other's homes, right? We need boundaries, and this, even like this sorts of order, it starts getting into God's law. It starts getting into, there's a there's a way for life to thrive, isn't there? And there's a way for it not to thrive. If you took a seed, right? We just started talking about seeds last week. If you took a seed, any seed, and you went down to Antarctica and planted it, would that work? No. There's an order to creation. Antarctica is not the place to plant anything. If you just threw it out into the Pacific Ocean, you're gonna grow an apple tree at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean? No, because there's boundary, there's place, there's order. There's a place for that seed to flourish, and there's a place for that seed to die. So this is already speaking to something about life that God is building in, is that there's a place of flourishing and a place of death. It's easy to see when we go and see a volcano or something, right? Like, if I step into the lava, I die. If I don't, I'm alive, right? It's easy to see that there's a place of flourishing and a place of not flourishing. It gets harder to tell when it's not molten hot lava in front of us, but it's important to note that God is building this concept into his world. So this order is there, and that order reflects God. It reflects his goodness. It reflects his wisdom as well. So I want to read a couple, or just I'm going to read one text for you. You guys can keep your hand over in Genesis. We're going to go to Psalm chapter 8. And this is a psalm that I know we've referred to, but we're going to keep going back to because it's one of my favorites and it speaks to all of that's happening in creation. Psalm 8. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babies and infants, you have established strength because of your foes, to still the enemy and the avenger. When I looked at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings, and crowned him with glory and honor. You have given him dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. So for here, we get a Psalm of David. David is looking at creation, and what's his response? Yes, a grateful, appreciative, it's awesome. But also, he sees this as God's creation. Is there a way to look at creation and not see God? Yes. I'll contend yes. In the respect of um, if you have denied God in your heart, then of course you're going to look at creation and just see a tree or a mountain. And we have eons of history books of people who worship creation and not the creator. So what we see here is when we get into things like Psalm 8, David is responding to the majesty, the magnificence of creation. And think about how amazing it is. But as he's looking out at the stars at night, what he is seeing is the glory of God. So as we enter into this day of creation, in this fourth day of creation, we see God's glory. So part of what outer space and looking out into space is all about is seeing the glory of God. Just think about this for a moment. How fun, like it's fun to go out and look at the stars, right? I mean, some of us are really into it, some of us maybe not as much. Some of us live in a neighborhood where it's just street lights and it's kind of hard, but you don't have to drive very far out of town when darkness comes and you can start to see lights. And when you see those lights, and if you ever get to be in a place where it is, I still remember when uh, the camp that we worked at when I met my wife out in Colorado. Yeah, it was middle of nowhere, 45 minutes from pavement, and it was 8,500 elevation, 8,500 feet. And so in the middle of Colorado, I never seen so many stars in my entire life. And it was like literally breathtaking. It's hard to stare up into that sky and be able to not be humbled by it. So if you've ever had a moment like this, I want you to imagine this. God designed space to do that for you, to reveal his goodness and his power, his grandness. You guys ever been to the Griffith Observatory? Yeah. If you haven't, just go. It's worth it. And yes, yeah, it gets into evolution things and stuff like that. And like, oh, yeah, 29, floppity jillion years ago, it was the Earth gets older and older as science moves on. Um, but you start to really, we went and saw one of the shows in the planetarium, and you start to feel so small. And this is like a good place. Do you think David feels small in this? Yeah, he does. It, but do you think about this? He's God's anointed king, and he feels small. So, uh, there's a beauty, there's a power that's happening here. And even the fact that God is establishing order, he's establishing seasons, he's putting these heavenly bodies into the sky, and maybe there's other purposes for them. Maybe there's, other things that we need to know about them. I'm not sure, but what I do know is that one of the reasons is to reveal the glory of God, right? So that's what it's there for, and we can rejoice in that. Uh, and the other thing that we want to see is that because they're fixed, there's something that I'm going to call the laws of days that are put into effect. How long is a day? 24 hours. Do we get to determine how long a day is? No. Would we like to? Yes. There are days when I'm like, I wish today was done. And there are days where like I need a few more hours, right? But do we get to determine what that is? No. Do we get to determine how long a year is? No. And the older we get, the faster it gets, right? But it there is there are laws built into it. So everybody in human history has to enter into this space. But God is bringing about this notion of seasons and days and all these things. And how good is that, right? So he's even putting the Earth. I mean, we know now it's like right the Earth on an orbit on a circuit, so that it is bound by that. Okay, yeah, okay, okay. I'll repeat it for those streaming as you meander. Mm-hmm. Okay, so day one, light and dark. Day two, evening, morning. Correct. Oh, I love that you're talking about this. This is going to lead us to the next thing. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so just to repeat a little bit and to narrate it back, day one we have light, right? We have evening, we have morning, we have day. So we have time, right? So time is introduced. And by the way, the thing that we also get in here because we get seasons is numbers are introduced here. Numbers didn't exist before, but now we get numbers. Um, that's for the engineers in the house for you. Yeah. Yeah, you're happier. You're happier now. All right. So, but yet we see now all of a sudden we see the sun, and we see all the stars, all of the sources of light that we know about. So this is an important distinction. Light was created before the sun, right? God's word tells us that. So this is really cool. This means that God chose to put light within the sun, to, in a sense, submit all of light to the heavenly bodies. So this was, I mean, we talked about like the gathering, and we see like the gathering of land and the sorting and the separating that's happening with sky and water, with land and water, and some of that. We see the same thing happening with light. So light's been there, but now God is organizing it and restricting it to the sun. Yes. So the early light, yeah, being God's glory, yes. But we also see him creating, creating light. Yeah, God has right. God is described as light, and we're hanging out in that reality a little bit during worship. But what we see is that um, God created light and created like light waves. Um, but we see that light was just light, and there was a distinction between light and dark. But yet God had still. Now, what does that look like? Our minds can't quite understand it. Can you understand a day without the sun? Not like you're in Seattle and it's a cloudy day, right? Right. So we see that later. So if we start looking over to Revelation chapter 21 and 22, especially 22 speaks of this. Like it says the sun and the moon are no more because Jesus is the source of our light. Okay? So there's and that we could go a whole, right? We could go in a whole end time. I know. Okay, Joe's like I already requested Revelation. So if you're on the Revelation boat, then let me know. We might need to right. We might need to get there together. So what we see is that God is is in a way submitting light to these bodies of light. How much does this all of a sudden introduce the concept of incarnation, right? Christ submitting himself to the flesh. So we see all of a sudden, like, what I love about this is we already have plants growing, we have dirt, we have water, we have all these things where it's like life can flourish. We have light, and there's not a single human being. There's not even an animal on the earth yet. Yet God is creating all these things for the sake of life to flourish. We are recipients of light, right? We're going to walk outside, we're going to have the sun on our face, it's going to feel nice, it's going to warm us, it's going to feel really good. That was put there for our sake. And so that submitting light, right, bringing it into a body is there for us to bring about life and to continue life. Yeah.
So before day 4, there wasn't the concept of a 24-hour day?
No, because okay, so this
So then
I want to
God
jump.
could have spent the first 3 days with unknown amount of hours that we know it by.
Okay, so the question is then, is it not a 24-hour day prior
The first
to,
3 days.
yeah, the first 3 days? So here's my response to that, because you were asking a similar thing. My response is God uses the word day. The Hebrew word day literally means 24 hours. It's used all over the Old Testament. It's the exact same word. He doesn't he doesn't ever change what that means. And we have to remember that God uses language so that we understand what's happening here. And he does describe a 24-hour day. He does, like, it's an actual day. Now the problem is when we don't understand something, we fill in the gaps. So if we take God and the miracle of creation, we take the Lord out of it, let's fill in some gaps. And what do we do with that? We put in time. Well, but what about, and we start making assumptions, but we're going to go right to what the word says. And that's always a good place to be. Go to what the word says. And when we do that, what we see here is that these are days. Now, here we see he fleshes all of this out and turns it into seasons. And what I would even argue is what we understand as a week, though a week hasn't been completed yet, right? It'll all fit within this. And the notion of months. And sometimes this is the sort of thing I give my brain over to, is like, how would I redesign time? Because it feels weird, right? And like 24-hour days, maybe we should just make that a 10-hour day, or maybe we should just make, months different length, so that it's a little bit more tidy. But then I'm like, no, it's not very tidy. Uh,
Then your seasons would be off.
my seasons would be way off. I know. My weeks, and you'd be like, why is Pastor Todd late? Oh, he thinks it's February still. Um, so yeah, I would get very much off. But he's given us this notion of time that we all have to live under. We're all bound by it, but yet this is where we can flourish. Uh, at, at some point tonight, you guys are going to be exhausted, and you're going to go to bed. You're built for day and night. God put in his creation. He's like, I'm going to turn out the lights for you so that you can rest, because that's what you need, and that's who you are. So all of this is for us, and there's boundary in this. It can feel restrictive and not what we like, but it's there for us. And so the whole notion of day, I think that it's only a modern scientific mind that is looking at these, I'm going to say, tools that are not overly reliable at dating things, uh, in order to try and add in time. So time is like a substitute for God in a lot of ways for the scientific world. Like, we're going to take him out, and the miraculous divine power of the Lord. Does that track a little bit? And so the only way that we can make that happen is like trillions of years. Yeah.
Seems to me that day 4 is when time is defined, and can't even talk about time in 1, 2, 3.
Well, he refers to day though. And the word that he uses.
God's day can be whenever he wants it. But once he sets the night and day, that's the definition of our time.
So the comment is that night and day is like it would be God's definition, right? He can define it however he wants, and that it seems like this is the instituting of a 24-hour day.
He talks about the day and the night.
Right. He does talk about day and night. He does talk about seasons.
He really starts to lay out time.
Right.
Or it's anybody's guess.
Right. And you're right. And I think that it's important. And one of the things that you may not remember, because again, we're on part 11. So it was like months ago at this point. One of the things that it's important to note is that because we literally can't fathom like in the beginning and what was that like we just can't, our brain cannot go there, so we try to fill in gaps, we try to make assumptions, uh, so it's important for us in that moment of not understanding is two things. One is it's okay if we don't understand. It's okay if God is God and something happened and something existed and we don't know what that looked like, because we're bound by our experience and our knowledge. Uh, so it's important to have that submission, but then we need something to rely upon in that moment. So we can sit in a place of unknowing, but it's important to just hear what God has to say. So I'm gonna just reiterate, when God says day, he calls it a day. And he uses that word for us.
Because we don't know before.
Right. We don't know before time, and there is no before because time didn't exist. But once he begins time, which I'm going to contend is day one, because he calls it the first day. But here we start to get like everything fixed, and we start to get seasons, and it's not just day, but it's beyond day.
He's giving the day order and the seasons.
Right.
And the hours.
It's beginning to be fleshed out.
Opposed to instead of,
Right.
instead of just saying day, now he's saying this is what is in a day, which makes a year.
Yeah. And he's saying like the day is going to be a part of a bigger thing.
Right.
Yeah. Which is weeks, months, seasons. Yeah. Anders.
Well, to divest ourselves a little bit from the definition of the day being the rotation of the earth around its own axis, which is what defines the day for us. If we go to Mars, the rotation around its axis is different, and its rotation around the sun is different. And scientists and astronomers are well familiar with the fact that a Mars day is a different day than an Earth day. But if we went to Mars, we would still count our birthday according to Earth years and Earth days. And so the concept of time being locked into our rotation around our axis is transportable. And therefore, Alan, I would suggest that God could have a time concept that is separate from Earth's rotation around its own axis for 3 days prior to the establishment of those mechanisms for our dating.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But it could be a 24-hour day prior to 24-hour rotation establishment happens.
Yeah. So
There is a conundrum for those who believe in the multi-billion-year-old solar system, and that is that the Earth's rotation is slowing down around its own axis.
Yeah.
If you believe that the Earth has been rotating around its own axis for 3-4 billion years, which is a working theory, then it would have been spinning so fast at the beginning of its spinning, if you extrapolate backwards from how much it has been slowing down, that things would just be disintegrating. So the rate of measurable slowdown of the Earth around its own axis makes it impossible to extrapolate backwards billions of years. And those days would be like minutes.
Right. So I'm gonna do my best to, just for the sake of the streamer, to speak about this. So I'm so and I'm going to add to this. So there's a little bit of my own embellishment, Andrew. So I apologize. But essentially, we can import our Earth day onto, if we move to Mars. Mars has a different day than us, but we still would have our own Earth day birthday, and no matter how long we would live there, assuming we could live on Mars, and we would still be aging in the similar way, though we can start getting into very confusing things about time and space. And I understand that there's a lot with that. Uh, so what I'm going to say is um, let's go back to this notion of what is God saying and why is he saying it to us. This text is here for you, and this is God's word for you about the origin of everything. There's not anything that was made that wasn't made by God. It was all from him, from his mind, from his heart, from his hands, all from God. And I know that those are, you know, analogies, uh, but they're all from him. And that John 1 speaks about that, and lots of other texts speak about that. So we want to go back to him. It's important to know that we can take God's word for face value. And so when I hear day, I can take it as that. That was written for me. And God defines what a day is. He came up with the idea. I want to change it, but I'm just going to work off of his measuring, and he makes a day a day. Now we can own this is the other thing that's with it. We can only understand this. And I think that this is kind of what you were alluding to, Mark. Like we can only understand a day within how we experience it. That's all that we can understand it. So the reason I say that is because we only understand the day with a sun. So tomorrow I'm going to wake up, the sun will come up, and then I know, right? The dawn of a new day, or midnight will hit, right? And it's the new day is how we count it. But it's still, we don't get to change it. It is what it is. And God brings that into the story. And this has only been like 100 years or so of questioning this. When you look at the ancients, there's no question about this. Like this is just what God did. And so all the early church fathers, I've been reading a lot of Ambrose on this topic, and he was around like 4th and 5th century. And he wrote extensively about creation. And he actually understood things like orbits and things like that, which was kind of interesting. Uh, but it's important to see that the day is the day, and if we want to get into some of like theistic evolution is kind of like the door that gets opened with some of it, then we have to use a lot of caution. Um, but the day is a day. It's the word yom in Hebrew, and it just gets used multiple places. Mark, I'm sure.
I was just going to say, sometimes we feel like we have to provide a justification for what science is saying, and I agree. Sometimes science is trying to disprove God and use time as the new God. And you see the same thing with the flood, where it's like, we're going to discount all of these things that we see on the earth, like you said, like dating and things like that, and we're going to say that it was time, pressure, things like that, and discount the fact that the flood happened, and you can see it in all these cultures all across the globe. We're going to deny the existence of that and say that it was just time, millions of years, water flowing through, like the Grand Canyon, for instance, versus like open the door to it could have been that the flood literally happened and happened across the globe. So, we don't have to like justify ourselves to this theory that the earth is billions of years old. We can, like you said, we can take it on face value. We don't have to try to like reconceive scripture to fit within science.
Right, and so this is like we don't have to. I'm just gonna the last phrase. Like we don't have to, or I'll change what you say. We don't have to defend science, right? Because they're taking God out of it in many places, not every place. But I think that when we're okay with not the billions of years of history, it actually is. It's so much more powerful of a story, and we could only exist through the miracle of God. It is impossible for all this to happen. Impossible. God made it so. How powerful is he? How good is he? Did you have something else, Mark?
Just the thing that's really cool to me, and I appreciate Bob mentioning this, that, when we get to heaven, there will be,
imitation light that we come to know as the sun will be replaced by the light of God.
It's a vessel. The sun is a vessel of light, right?
And I
Yeah.
think about, like the transfiguration and the words that the writers tried to bring to say, how do I describe this light?
Mm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it's going to be like.
Mm.
This beautiful light that we just see an image of it today with
Mhm.
the sun
Yeah.
that happened to come about on day 4.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's just a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, Sarah.
Our perspective as Christians, as we read this, like this should all reveal the glory of God.
Mhm.
And so, like, orbits were mentioned and revolving around a light. And so each day, I think, just reveals another aspect of God. Each aspect of creation
Mhm.
is there
Yeah.
to reveal God's glory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Tim.
Make it really confusing, but
Feel free. Feel free. We have no time left, so yeah, muck it up at the end. When was gravity created? That's a good question.
we have plants without rotating bodies.
It's fascinating. We have plants without a sun, but light. We have light, but we can't understand that without a source. So yeah, I'm gonna say that gravity comes into play when we see a distinction between water and land. But that is a guess because we're not told. So I mean, at some point you're gonna be like, when was Satan created? And I'm gonna say I'm not totally sure, but we know that he was, and it's somewhere in here. We'll get there. I mean, you're probably like, answer that question right now, Pastor Todd. I want receipts. Right. So yeah, we're filling in the blanks, but I know that gravity was created because I'm currently using it. It's here, and yeah, right. Exactly. Sometimes it's strong. Yeah. So. Yeah, and even thinking about how, scientists will figure out, oh, if we took the sun away, how long do we have to survive? And it's like, it's not long. Somebody could tell. I mean, it's a matter of like seconds, I think. 8 minutes? Oh, we got a lot of time then. But if the sun just went poof, we have 8 minutes and then we're all goners. But in reality, if God just removed light from the sun and the stars and just became light again, we're actually okay. Now, some of you are like, no, gravity and orbit, and do we just get flung off this ball? We're still in the Lord's hands. All of it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Well, we know God made everything, right?
Mhm.
The sun and the moon and the stars. What was the purpose of all the other planets?
I have no idea, other than it's really cool to look at. Yeah, I don't know. What is the purpose of the planets is the question. That I think that so I'm the only thing that I know. So I'm just going to go off of what the Bible tells me is it reveals the glory of God. Is there life on other planets? We found microbial life, but if that's not like aliens or like Looney Tunes Martian guy. He's not out there that I know of. Yeah.
Backtracking to the light, the being days, 24-hour days
Mhm.
before we have the sun. I like your mention of the incarnational element of
Mhm.
light being put into the vessel of the sun.
Mhm.
Because if you had a 24-hour day before the sun, that can be a rhythm that, along with the light, is being
Put into.
there.
Right. It's being put into that rhythm. Yes.
And so that their actual rhythm of movement comes from something that came before them.
Hmm. Right. So just like I just wanted to put this up here because I know we're not going to get really to much more than that. But kind of what you were speaking to is that rhythm, right? And the sun, even like it's ruling over the day, right? It tells us that it's a new day. It leaves and comes right back. Uh, I mean, it doesn't leave and come right back, but that's how we think of it from our perspective. but it's providing us a rhythm. So it submits to the day, the sun submits to God's order. We have to submit to the sun's order, don't we? We're just bound by it. I mean, I know that we're all like, we work from home, we choose our own hours type people now, or we're retired and we have 6 Saturdays and then a Sunday, like, right? I mean, some of you are like really not bound by time. Um, but, and you earned it, right? But there is like, there's an order that we all do have to submit to, whether we want to or not. I mean, right? There's only so many hours you can stay awake and then you die, right?
But there's also hope in that incarnational part of looking at it. You can look at this, I had never thought of it in the order of light being there before the sun was there, that in the same way that is maybe a prequel to Christ's incarnation, it
Mhm.
also can be a prequel to how he comes into us and gives us the power, to give us the rhythm to operate in the path that he would have us go.
Absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up. So as light gets put into the sun, we get to understand and we get a little maybe foretaste, foreshadowing of God in the flesh, right? At the incarnation. We also get an image of God in like in the spirit alive in his church. And I'm going to say that this is where we start getting into signs. So we get incarnation intro, is what I'm just going to call it, with light being put into the sun. But there's another notion of the moon here, which I think speaks of this. Does the moon have its own light? No, it merely reflects the light. Okay, so this is an image, it's a sign, and so it's like alerting us to the church. And we're not going to read it for the sake of time, but Psalm 12 speaks of this reflective quality of light. If you are at home and you have a fireplace, you turn off all the lights and light the fireplace, and then you turned around and looked at a person, right? Just that moment. What are you going to see? You're going to see light dancing off, reflecting off of that person. You're going to be able to make out them and who they are and understand what's in front of you. uh, so the moon, this is how the moon works, but this is also how the church works, isn't it? The church reflects not our own light. We do not create light. We do not control light. Light is wild, it is untamed. God's grace is, we don't get to domesticate it. We're not paper training God here, right? This is wild and free. And the gospel is wild and free. So the church is merely here to reflect whatever God is saying and doing. And we see what he says and he does in the work of Jesus Christ, right? He is the word made flesh. He is the light of the world that comes to shine into our darkness. So light makes things appear and helps us understand what things are. So light does this. And God set up signs in order to, this is the biggie here, to point us to God. If you read the Gospel of John, that word sign comes up a lot. Now, the Gospel of John, if you just get a moment, it doesn't take that long. You could sit down and read the whole thing. You could probably do it in less than an hour, for sure less than an hour, I should say. That you could sit down and read it, and you'll see signs. This is a sign. Jesus doing a miracle is a sign. His teaching is a sign. That all this was happening as a sign to point us to the Lord. So there is, when we start getting into the function, I love that you asked, like, what's the purpose of, another planet, whatever it is. Somehow it's pointing us to God. For right now, it's just amazing and vast and so far away. I can't even totally understand how far away, like, Jupiter is right now, or Saturn. I can't. You could write down a number and I would just feel like it's made up, right? If we had if we made the sun the size of a marble, you can't even fit our solar system in this room, right? I mean, it's just so big. So all of this is pointing us to God somehow. And of course, yes, we should explore, we should learn about space, we should study all of these things because more and more they're going to show us something about the Lord. Even the fact that, right now, which planet is it that orbits like this way? Some of you guys know, but no, like this, not this way, but has the poles at the ends like this. Is it Neptune? I think so. But yeah, I mean, it's like just think about that for a moment. Like you're going like paper towels, right? You know, like yeah. Right. That's the order, right? And just how amazing it really is. And maybe as we look further out, we start seeing things like black holes, nebulas, and comets, and it's pointing us to God. There's so much happening that's beyond our understanding. It's pointing us to Him, into His arms. He understands it. He knows it. He created it. He's good with it. Yeah, He's allowing us to there's even like apps on your phone. You can just pull it up and start point it to the sky, and you can see what constellation is right in front of you. You can know. I'll also point you to a brilliant little book by H.A. Rey, the Curious George guy. Wrote a great astronomy book. It's like an intro if you guys want to learn more about stars. It has illustrations that look like Curious George illustrations in it too. It's good. It's good. It's a really good one. It's more than a kid. It's not really much of a kid's book. Maybe older kids. But anyway.
There's a drive to go out and find what's out there.
Yes. But I love that curiosity, don't you? There's a drive. She said there's a drive to find out what's out there, and I'm going to just say I love the curiosity of people like wanting to know, and who knows what we'll find. It's like the explorers, right? It's like De Soto and Magellan and Columbus. Like we're just going to go that way, and we're just going to see what happens. I think if I go this way, we're going to find something, and they found stuff. We're here because they found stuff. But maybe out there, well, maybe we'll find stuff. But regardless, whatever we find, what's it going to do? Yeah, it all of it is. So don't fear it, embrace it, enjoy it, listen to the sonic booms that are, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. So the comment was just that the curiosity is, it reveals a longing that we have, a hunger and thirst for God, and even though there's so many people pursuing outer space and things out there that don't believe in Him, it's that hunger and thirst is still built within us. I pray so. I pray so. I think that I raise your hand if you would love to go into outer space, like legitimately. How many of you would love to? Okay, now raise your hand if that sounds a little scary. We're actually like 50-50 in this room, maybe a little bit more on the scary side of things. I think it would be amazing. I'd be a little scared about taking off and landing, but being out there just sounds amazing. But the good news is we get to enjoy outer space right here on our planet, and we get to enjoy, and it's all pointing us to Jesus and to God and His goodness. So we're going to close today with a word of prayer. So yeah, let's do that. Gracious God, you are good and faithful. You have put light into this world for our sake. You've created days and months and seasons for our sake, and all of this, from the stars to order, these heavenly bodies, they're there to move us towards you, to point us to you, so that we cling tightly to you. May we as your church be like the moon and reflect you and your light to the world, to provide light to the world, to lead the world to you. We praise you, God, for all that you've done, and your name is truly majestic in all the earth.